Tonight, as the world outside hushes and shadows lengthen, we embark on a journey into the intricate, often dangerous, realm of human desire and the standards of beauty that shape it. Before you settle into the soft embrace of your chair, perhaps take a moment to engage with this space, a simple like a thoughtful subscription, but only if the stories woven here genuinely resonate with your spirit. And in the quiet glow of your screen, share where you are in the world, what time the stars or the sun grace your sky. It's a small ritual, a connection across continents, always a profound joy to imagine the diverse tapestry of listeners joining this shared narrative. Now, let the ambient light soften. Perhaps a gentle breeze from a nearby fan can provide that subtle, comforting hum. And together, we'll ease into the currents of tonight's tale, a journey not just through history, but through the very heart of human vanity, identity, and the relentless pursuit of an ideal. Rome's passionate, almost obsessive, love affair with blonde hair wasn't born in the perfumed tranquility of a patrician salon, nor whispered among the marble statues of the Forum. Its origins were far more brutal, forged in the clanging crucible of conquest, on the blood-soaked earth of distant battlefields. When the formidable Roman legions, disciplined and unyielding, marched northward into the untamed lands of Gaul and Germania, they anticipated confronting a familiar foe, rough, mud-caked barbarians, their forms obscured by the grime of their primitive existence. What they actually stumbled upon, however, sent a jolt of astonished fascination through their hardened ranks. There, amidst the primeval forests, and across windswept plains, stood towering men and women, their skin startlingly pale, almost translucent as freshly quarried marble, and their hair, a cascade of pure sunlight spun gold, catching the northern sun in a way that defied the Romans' darkest expectations. For centuries, Rome had meticulously cultivated an empire of arrogance, believing itself the zenith of civilization, the arbiter of all taste and beauty. Yet, in the face of these savages, they suddenly confronted a stunning deficiency, the complete absence of natural blonde hair within their own sun-kissed populace. To a Roman soldier, accustomed to the dark, rich hues of Mediterranean beauty, these northern tribes were a terrifying enigma, a paradox of raw ferocity and ethereal radiance. They screamed barbaric war cries that echoed through the misty valleys, drank from the skulls of their enemies in gruesome rituals, and somehow, inexplicably, still managed to look annoyingly, captivatingly radiant while doing it. The initial military dispatches from the front lines, intended to convey strategic information, began to read less like sober reports of war and more like bewildered, almost envious fashion columns. The enemy possesses golden hair. Stop. It gleams unnervingly in battle. Stop. Request immediate shipment of bleach. Urgent. The admiration, initially a grudging acknowledgement of an unexpected beauty, swiftly morphed into something far more pragmatic, a burgeoning business opportunity. Every war, particularly a Roman one, inevitably left behind its spoils. But for Rome, the plunder now included something entirely novel: hair. As the legions crushed resistance, slavers and entrepreneurial wig merchants followed in their wake, meticulously collecting the shimmering blonde locks from defeated Germanic women. These precious strands were then painstakingly washed, perfumed with exotic oils, and painstakingly styled before being sold at exorbitant prices in Rome's bustling, cacophonous markets. It was the ancient world's inaugural luxury brand, a testament to imperial power and exotic allure, authentic barbarian blonde. Owning one of these exquisite wigs became the ultimate status symbol, a tangible declaration of wealth, influence, and the sheer reach of Roman conquest. Senators' wives, their tunics flowing with embroidered silk, would strut through the sun-drenched marble courtyards of their villas, their heads adorned with golden curls that, just weeks prior, had belonged to women who had valiantly, perhaps desperately, tried to kill their husbands. Fashion in Rome, it seemed, was always a delicate dance between the ironic and the occasionally war crime adjacent. The wealthy, of course, revelled in this opulent display, their imported blonde tresses shimmering under the Mediterranean sun. But the poor, ever yearning to keep pace with the capricious whims of elite fashion, were not to be deterred. Those who couldn't possibly afford the prohibitive cost of imported hair resorted to desperate, homemade remedies. They concocted a potent, often perilous, bleach from a crude mixture of wood ash, harsh vinegar, and sticky goat fat, a combination that, while promising divine beauty, more often delivered a blistering chemical warfare directly to the scalp. Ancient graffiti, scrawled on crumbling walls and amphorae, offers a vivid, if unflattering, glimpse into the results, which range from a patchy, despairing yellow to a truly radiant, if short-lived, gold. The stench of vinegar and singed hair, a faint but persistent aroma, became an olfactory signature of ambition in the poorer districts. Predictably, Rome's prolific and perpetually opinionated poets had much to say about this new blonde craze. Ovid, the eternal provocateur, never one to let a juicy scandal or a societal trend pass unremarked, both adored and mercilessly mocked blonde women in his verses. He lauded them as alluring, dangerously seductive, yet simultaneously condemned them as deceptive, their golden facades masking dubious intentions. He was, in essence, the ancient Roman version of a modern-day influencer warning. Don't trust girls with highlights. The Moralists, an ever-present chorus of disapproval in Roman society, quickly joined the fray. They complained bitterly that Roman women were abandoning centuries of venerable tradition for what they perceived as northern vanity. A fair assessment, to be honest, as the allure of golden hair transcended social strata. But then again, so was everyone else in Rome, from the emperor's court to the bustling marketplaces. And so, in a glorious, audacious act of cultural appropriation, Rome, the empire that swallowed cultures whole, decided that blonde hair, once dismissed as barbaric, savage, and unequivocally foreign, was now to be reclassified. It was sophisticated, it was Roman, it was, in fact, divine. This was empire in its most intimate, most follicle, deep form. For nothing, absolutely nothing, articulated the brutal triumph of "we conquered you," quite as emphatically as wearing your defeated enemy's scalp as a fashionable hairstyle. To the Roman elite, these exquisite wigs were far more than mere fashion accessories. They were tangible, shimmering trophies of conquest. You weren't simply adopting a hairstyle, you were literally wearing victory on your head. A senator's wife, her imported blonde curls gleaming under the Roman sun, was sending a clear, unequivocal message. My husband slays barbarians and I wear them. Subtlety, it must be acknowledged, was never Rome's strongest suit. The quality and provenance of these wigs varied wildly, directly correlating with the wearer's status and wealth. The cheap ones, often coarse and smelling faintly of despair, were cobbled together from the meagre offerings of the less fortunate or the hastily shorn hair of slaves. The truly expensive ones, however, were meticulously crafted from the carefully selected locks of northern women. Premium, virgin locks, as one might morbidly describe them, if one were entirely devoid of a soul. Rich Romans, treating these hairpieces with an almost religious reverence, stored them in intricately carved ivory boxes, nestled alongside their most precious jewels, and their increasingly moral decay. Such wigs were not just possessions, they were heirlooms, passed down through generations, each strand imbued with a history of conquest and luxury. Nor was the blonde craze exclusively a feminine domain. A surprising number of Roman men, particularly those clinging to fading youth or battling the indignity of baldness, also succumbed to its allure. A few senators, whose gravitas was perhaps overshadowed by their gleaming pates, discreetly wore blonde wigs to conceal their receding hairlines. For what, after all, proclaims, "I rule the known world," quite like pretending to be a 20-year-old from Gaul. Others, more daring, attempted to dye their greying hair with the same potent eye-watering mixtures women used, usually achieving a rather unfortunate shade of orange that was, to all accounts, mildly flammable. The poets, ever vigilant for human folly, predictably had a field day. Juvenal, the sneering satirist, famously quipped that half the women in Rome possessed German heads but Roman hearts. It was intended as a scathing insult, a jab at their perceived abandonment of Roman virtue. But, in a delicious twist of irony, the women of Rome, utterly enchanted by their golden reflections, took it as a resounding compliment. The supreme irony, of course, was that while Roman women were diligently copying their northern captives, those very barbarians, the Gauls and Germanic tribes, likely found the Romans' blonde obsession utterly ridiculous. Fair hair was a natural, commonplace attribute to them, not a meticulously acquired status symbol. Meanwhile, in Rome, it had become the ultimate, most ostentatious display of wealth and, indeed, of conquest. Fashion as conquest, beauty as propaganda. Only in Rome could a scalp double as such a profound, multifaceted social statement, a silent, golden testament to imperial might and personal vanity. Not every Roman, however, could afford the ultimate luxury, a wig painstakingly crafted from the scalp of a defeated barbarian woman. For the less fortunate, which in the grand scheme of Roman society meant anyone who wasn't directly married to a senator, an emperor, or a particularly successful merchant, there was another far more perilous path to achieving that coveted golden hue. This alternative involved self-inflicted chemical warfare, a harrowing testament to the lengths to which Romans would go in pursuit of beauty. Roman beauty manuals, meticulously transcribed on papyrus scrolls and passed down through generations, offered dozens of elaborate, often terrifying, recipes for achieving that radiant, sunlit shade. Unfortunately, a common thread running through all of them was a glaring, almost criminal, absence of any concern for safety. The most prevalent formula, a truly delightful concoction, involved a potent, corrosive mix of wood ash, harsh vinegar, sticky goat fat and raw sulfur. This pungent brew, described by one particularly unlucky poet as the perfume of regret, worked by quite literally burning the hair until it surrendered its natural colour, often with disastrous side effects. Women, desperate for transformation, would sit for hours under the unforgiving Mediterranean sun, their heads slathered in this sizzling, malodorous paste. They hoped to emerge looking divinely radiant, like Venus herself, but more often than not, they resembled singed scarecrows, their hair brittle and their scalps inflamed. Some, seeking a less agonizing path, even imported a mysterious powder from Germania known as a sapho, rumored to lighten hair without pain. It did not. It merely cost significantly more, adding financial regret to the physical discomfort. Yet Romans, being Romans, possessed an almost perverse fascination with anything expensive and difficult. This only made the sapho and other painful bleaching methods more popular. Wealthy women, fueled by an insatiable desire for social one-upmanship, competed fiercely to see who could achieve the palest, most ethereal shade of blonde without experiencing complete scalp collapse. Bald patches, far from being a source of shame, were often considered a minor inconvenience, even a badge of honour. Irrefutable proof of one's unwavering commitment, indeed one's sacrifice, to the relentless demands of beauty. The public baths, usually bustling with gossip and political intrigue, were also filled with the distinct aroma of goat and sulphur, as women openly discussed whose hairdresser was a miracle worker, whose wig line was suspiciously crooked, and who smelled faintly, yet persistently, of the farmyard. Stylists, those brave souls who wielded these dangerous concoctions, were treated like miracle workers, their skills elevating them to minor celebrity status. The very best among them possessed a rare and highly sought after talent, the ability to bleach hair to a brilliant gold without leaving visible trauma, a truly remarkable feat in a world utterly devoid of protective gloves or, seemingly, a collective conscience regarding chemical burns. Of course, the men of Rome, ever ready with their unsolicited opinions, had plenty to say. Roman poets, in a display of classic misogynistic hypocrisy, loved to pen flowery odes praising golden-haired maidens, while simultaneously mocking them for the obvious use of dye. It's the oldest trick in the misogyny handbook: invent an impossible beauty standard, then insult women for daring to try and meet it. Ovid, the eternal flirt and self-proclaimed expert on love, famously warned lovers to avoid the false blonde. Naturally, this sage advice emanated from a man who was eventually exiled for behaviour deemed entirely inappropriate, proving that hypocrisy was not just a Roman trait, but a poetic one. Meanwhile, the acrid, unmistakable smell of burnt sulphur and vinegar drifted through the cobbled streets of Rome, a pervasive, invisible sign of ambition, vanity, and perhaps a touch of desperation. Every shining, golden head of hair had a story behind it, usually one involving mild poisoning, several days of throbbing headache, and a persistent itch. It was vanity, devotion, and chemical warfare rolled into one intoxicating, dangerous package. The steep price of beauty in a city where appearance often mattered more than comfort, and where fashion was quite literally a contact sport, fought on the battleground of one's own scalp. If there was one man in ancient Rome who truly, intimately understood the intoxicating chaos of blonde ambition, it was Ovid, poet, notorious gossip, and self-proclaimed expert on romance, beauty, and spectacularly bad decisions. Ovid was a figure of glittering contradictions. In a city where everyone meticulously pretended to be virtuous and failed spectacularly, Ovid distinguished himself by openly admitting his imperfections, embracing the very human follies others sought to conceal. His magnum opus, Ars Amatoria, or The Art of Love, was less a solemn poem and more a wickedly witty, scandalously practical guidebook for flirting, seduction, and strategic insincerity. Naturally, a man so attuned to the nuances of attraction had very strong, very contradictory thoughts about hair colour. According to Ovid, nothing quite captured a man's attention like a cascade of golden locks. Yet, In the very next breath, he declared that nothing revealed a woman's deceit faster than those same fake, artificial ones. He adored blondies, absolutely, but specifically those who appeared to have achieved their radiant hue effortlessly, without the telltale signs of labour. Classic man indeed. In one of his many contradictory verses, he would praise the golden waves that outshine the sun, only to immediately follow it up with a cautionary note. But if they come from a bottle, beware. His unspoken translation? He loved the look, but not the effort involved in achieving it. It was in essence the ancient Roman version of the modern lament, I like natural girls. You know, the kind who spend 3 painstaking hours looking utterly natural. Ovid's true genius lay in his ability to distill Roman hypocrisy into exquisite, often biting, poetry. He would playfully tease women for daring to dye their hair, while simultaneously penning odes about how utterly irresistible those very dyed locks made them. He mocked vanity, yet he utterly depended on it for inspiration, for the endless parade of human foibles that fueled his verses. He was arguably Rome's first true beauty influencer, dispensing advice in lyrical verse, probably while deftly avoiding ex-girlfriends in the bustling forum. He even offered practical tips, disguised as poetic musings, on how to maintain the illusion of natural blonde, suggesting careful application and the strategic use of veils to hide telltale roots. But his irreverent humour and scandalous themes did not sit well with the moral police of the Augustan era. Emperor Augustus, a man obsessed with restoring what he perceived as Rome's lost purity and traditional values, found Ovid's romantic escapades and his celebration of superficiality decidedly less than patriotic. A few too many risque jokes, a few too many thinly veiled references to imperial indiscretions, and our poetic beauty blogger found himself summarily exiled to Thomis, a desolate outpost on the edge of the empire, where, tragically, there were far fewer blondes to inspire his musings. Even in the cold, bleak isolation of exile, Ovid couldn't resist. He continued to write poignant, wistful letters back to Rome, vividly describing the golden-haired girls of the city, their beauty a distant, cherished memory. You can almost picture him staring out at the endless snows of the Balkans, a sigh escaping his lips, thinking, this would all be so much better if someone nearby owned a decent wig. Ovid's exile, a harsh punishment for mere poetry, proved two undeniable truths. One, that beauty standards, when wielded by an emperor, could indeed get you into mortal trouble, and two, that in Rome, even the most celebrated poets were ultimately slaves to fashion, mocking it, worshipping it, and, in Ovid's case, suffering profoundly for its fleeting allure. If anyone could transform a mere beauty trend into a powerful instrument of state policy, it was Poppaea Sabina. The second wife of Emperor Nero, Poppaea was a woman whose formidable hobbies included an insatiable appetite for luxury, a genius for ruthless scheming, and an uncanny knack for staying alive longer than most of Nero's other unfortunate friends. Poppaea wasn't born blonde. Her natural hair was likely a rich, dark hue, but she possessed an acute, almost intuitive, understanding that in the glittering, cutthroat world of Rome, gold was not merely a colour, it was the very essence of divinity, the visible manifestation of power. And if the gods weren't naturally bestowing that shade upon her, she would find another, more earthly, way to claim it. Her skin was famously pale, a stark contrast to the sun-kissed complexions of most Roman women, her eyes sharp and intelligent, and her hair, meticulously cultivated through an elaborate regimen of imported dyes, bespoke wigs, and possibly a divine patience known only to empresses, gleamed like pure sunlight filtered through the most expensive, amber-hued wine. Roman writers, a notoriously fickle and judgmental lot, both adored her breathtaking beauty and despised her for its potent effect, which, in the annals of Roman history, was usually a very reliable sign that she was doing something exquisitely, dangerously right. Tacitus, ever the grumpy, moralizing historian, described her as beautiful beyond all measure, but corrupt to her core, a phrase that, when translated from historian speak, essentially means, she looked absolutely incredible, and I'm furious about it. Poppaea's beauty regimen quickly became the stuff of legend, whispered in hushed tones through the forum and beyond. She allegedly bathed daily in the milk of 500 donkeys, a truly extravagant ritual meant to preserve her alabaster complexion. She reportedly wore pearls dissolved in vinegar, a corrosive yet fashionable concoction. And she owned enough wigs, imported from the furthest reaches of the empire, to single-handedly start a small, very well coiffed rebellion. Her hair was not merely an adornment, it was her crown, a shimmering emblem of status, a potent tool of seduction, and, most crucially, a subtle weapon in the intricate, deadly game of political warfare. Every perfectly sculpted curl seemed to whisper, "I control the emperor, and you most certainly do not." Her influence, like a gilded contagion, spread with astonishing speed. Within months, half of Rome, from ambitious matrons to aspiring courtesans, was desperately trying to copy her distinctive look: pale, almost luminous skin, hair the colour of molten gold, and an expression that coolly conveyed, "I've ruined 3 men before lunch, and it's barely noon." Shops overflowed with pungent bleaching powders, hastily assembled imported wigs, and polished bronze mirrors, as Roman women meticulously scrutinized their reflections. The entire city, it seemed, began to smell faintly of vinegar, sulphur, and raw, unbridled ambition. But being fashionable in Nero's increasingly paranoid and volatile Rome was a dangerous game. One day you might be the empress, setting the very trends that captivated the city. The next, your notoriously unstable husband might be ordering your death, simply because you dared to criticize his abysmal air solo. According to legend, Nero, in a fit of uncontrollable rage, struck Poppaea during her pregnancy, ending her life and that of their unborn child. Though some more charitable, or perhaps politically motivated, sources claimed it was merely a domestic accident, a phrase that, in Roman parlance, translated to, "We don't want to talk about it, and you'd be wise not to ask." Even in death, however, she remained an undeniable icon. Statues sculpted in her honour continued to depict her with flowing blonde curls, serene and utterly untouchable. The woman who had so defiantly redefined Roman beauty outlasted her volatile empire, immortalized in marble and myth. Poppaea didn't just go platinum, she weaponized it. And like everything Rome ever loved too much, it ended both beautifully and catastrophically, a testament to the empire's insatiable appetite for grandeur and its inherent tendency towards self-destruction. Rome possessed a peculiar, almost perverse talent. It could transform anything it conquered, even the very people it insulted, into a coveted fashion statement. The Germans and Gauls, those barbarians from the northern frontiers, had spent decades enduring the scathing contempt of Roman poets and historians, routinely dismissed as uncivilized savages. Yet their hair, that very symbol of their otherness, miraculously became the ultimate luxury item in the heart of the empire. Civilization, it seemed, was merely a matter of who eventually wore whose scalp. This profound irony, a testament to Rome's boundless hypocrisy, did not go unnoticed. To the average Roman moralist, that eternal species of man who disapproves of everything with fervent, self-righteous indignation, blonde hair was nothing short of an abomination. It represented corruption, moral decay, and a deeply worrying amount of German influence. It was, in their eyes, a visible manifestation of Rome's decline, a betrayal of its ancient virtues. To the average Roman woman, however, it represented something far more compelling: pure, unadulterated fabulousness. It was a cultural paradox in perfect Roman form. Blonde hair was barbarian, yet utterly irresistible. The very colour that once signified uncivilized wildness now denoted wealth, seduction, and a hint of dangerous allure. It was the same logic that led them to enthusiastically worship Greek gods after thoroughly conquering Greece, domination through imitation, a subtle absorption of the vanquished. Every poet and philosopher, from the most ascetic Stoic to the most hedonistic Epicurean, had an opinion on the matter. Seneca, Rome's champion of Stoicism, probably delivered lengthy, disapproving lectures on inner virtue and the fleeting nature of external beauty, all while pointedly staring at someone's shimmering highlights. Juvenal, the eternal grumbler, complained bitterly that foreign fashions corrupt Roman virtue. But if you read between his lines, his indignation often betrayed a rather keen, perhaps even envious, observation of the many blondies in his neighbourhood. Even Propertius, the romantic pessimist, warned that blonde women were deceptive sirens, luring men to their ruin, a sentiment that sounds suspiciously like he'd recently been dumped by one. Meanwhile, the Roman elite, with their characteristic flair for turning everything to their advantage, transformed barbarian into high culture. A senator's wife, wearing a golden wig, wasn't being rebellious, she was displaying power. She was, in her silent, shimmering way, declaring, "My husband conquers nations, and I accessorize accordingly." Her hair wasn't blonde because she aspired to look foreign. It was blonde because she could afford to be. It was a statement of imperial wealth, a visual testament to Rome's boundless reach. Of course, the actual barbarians, the Gauls and Germans, remained largely indifferent to Rome's internal debates about hair colour. They weren't reading Roman poetry or philosophical treatises. They were far too busy burning down Roman forts and living rent-free in Roman nightmares. While Rome was arguing about shades of gold, Germania was sharpening swords. This was the beating heart of Roman hypocrisy. They loved the beauty of the very people they despised, shamelessly stole their image, and then, with breathtaking audacity, rebranded it as Roman refinement. It was fashion as conquest, the ultimate transformation of brutality into elegance. So yes, to Rome, blonde initially meant barbarian, but that didn't stop them from eagerly bleaching their heads, buying wigs from the north by the cartload, and then, with a collective shrug, pretending the colour was entirely native. In the end, nothing was more quintessentially Roman than stealing what you couldn't naturally grow and then claiming it as your own innovation. Rome, with its unparalleled genius for turning every human foible into a grand spectacle, eventually found a way to elevate vanity to the realm of theology. If the people were determined to bleach their hair, then the gods, it was reasoned, would simply have to agree. And so with a collective, divine nod they did. In the vibrant tapestry of Roman art, literature, and popular imagination, the deities themselves gradually began to undergo a subtle, yet profound, makeover. Venus, the radiant goddess of love, who in her original Greek mythology was typically depicted with dark, flowing hair and olive skin, slowly, almost imperceptibly, evolved into a resplendent blonde. Statues, mosaics and frescoes across the empire began to portray her with sunlit curls, divine, glowing and, quite conveniently, perfectly in line with whatever was currently trending in the bustling forum that week. The underlying logic was disarmingly simple and utterly Roman. If blondes were universally considered beautiful, then the very goddess of beauty must possess blonde hair. Divine endorsement achieved, without the need for a council, a vote, or even a theological debate, just cultural gaslighting on a truly cosmic scale. Soon, other mythological figures followed suit. Nymphs, muses, and a host of mythical maidens all began appearing in golden tones, their hair shimmering with celestial light. Even Apollo, the golden god of light and music, whose association with gold was already established, was conveniently invoked as justification. See, the Romans seemed to declare the gods themselves prefer gold. It was theology by marketing, a celestial fashion magazine dictated by earthly trends. Rome's entire pantheon, it seemed, had been given a glossy, blonde-centric editorial spread. Of course, not everyone was entirely convinced by this divine rebranding. Some old-school moralists, clinging to ancient virtues, argued vehemently that dark hair represented virtue, discipline, modesty, the very bedrock of proper Roman values. Blondes, on the other hand, represented temptation, luxury, and, most damningly, afternoons spent doing absolutely nothing productive. In other words, heaven. Still, the message, disseminated through art and popular culture, stuck. Golden hair was divine hair. Temples, ever quick to capitalize on popular trends, even began selling charms and oils, claiming they could not only brighten the spirit, but also miraculously lighten the strands. Imagine trying to offer a solemn prayer while the woman next to you discreetly asks if your shade is natural. The trend reached such absurd heights that some women, perhaps emboldened by their newfound divinity, even claimed to be born blonder, a biological impossibility in Rome's predominantly Mediterranean climate. But truth, it seemed, was a flexible concept when fashion was involved. Men penned flowery odes to their lovers, sun-touched curls, very carefully omitting any mention that most of those curls were, in fact, detachable. The gods, it seemed, didn't really care. Rome was loud, decadent, and faithful only to appearances. If Venus had to change her hair colour to keep the city happy and her worshippers engaged, then so be it. After all, divinity in Rome operated much like politics. Whoever looked the part most convincingly garnered the most worship. In the end, it wasn't the gods who blessed blondies, it was blondies who rebranded the gods. Rome didn't just dye its hair, it dyed heaven itself. It was only a matter of time before the men of Rome, ever prone to envy and susceptible to the siren call of vanity, succumbed to the golden craze. Rome may have built an empire that spanned the known world, but it couldn't resist the allure of a good mirror or the tantalizing prospect of self-improvement, however superficial. After decades of mocking women for their desperate pursuit of the golden look, Roman men, with characteristic hypocrisy, decided they too would quite like to resemble northern warlords. Minus, of course, the frostbite, the paganism, and the general lack of central heating. The trend began. as most trends do with the young and the incorrigibly vain. These were the same types of men who spent more time meticulously oiling their hair and perfecting their toga drapes than they did polishing their armour. Soldiers returning from campaigns in Germania, having witnessed the golden-haired barbarians, first then began to brag not just about their victories, but about the startling beauty of their enemies' hair colour. The women there, one battle-hardened legionary probably recounted in a smoky tavern, his voice filled with a strange mix of awe and desire. They looked like sunlight itself. And suddenly, every Roman barber, accustomed to traditional dark cuts, began receiving suspicious requests that invariably started with, hypothetically speaking, how would one go about lightening this? Of course, the wealthy, with their boundless resources and even more boundless egos, led the way. Ambitious young men, eager to project an image of vigour and exotic allure, began lightening their hair using the very same potent sulphur and goat fat concoctions that their wives had been enduring. The results were, to put it mildly, mixed. Some emerged from the ordeal golden and triumphant, their new hues shimmering with youthful vitality. Others, less fortunate or perhaps less resistant to chemical burns, looked distinctly like overcooked bread, their hair a patchy, unnatural shade of yellow-orange. The pervasive smell of vinegar, sulphur, and unbridled ego soon filled the air of Rome's more exclusive barber shops. Even aging statesmen, ever conscious of their public image, got in on the act. Baldness was the great Roman fear, a visible, undeniable symbol of mortality, of fading virility, and the inexorable march of time. Julius Caesar, famously self-conscious about his receding hairline, meticulously combed what little hair he had forward, desperately trying to pretend he wasn't losing it. Had peroxide existed in his time, he would undoubtedly have dunked his head in it before every single Senate session. Barbers, once mere tradesmen, suddenly found themselves elevated to positions of surprising political importance. They listened to senators rant about honour duty and the glory of Rome, all while delicately applying imported German hair dust, essentially ancient bleach, to their illustrious clients' thinning locks. It didn't just lighten hair, it ate through pride, revealing the raw vanity beneath the stoic facade. The Moralists, predictably, had a collective meltdown. "Men are becoming women!" they cried, their voices hoarse with indignation, as if that particular cultural exchange hadn't been happening since the invention of wine and comfortable tunics. But vanity, like empire, is relentlessly contagious. Soon, even gladiators, those paragons of masculine fury, were bleaching their curls to attract a more fervent following among the admiring throngs in the stands. Nothing, it seems, says masculine fury quite like shimmering golden highlights under the flickering torchlight of the arena. By the time of Emperor Commodus, a man whose vanity knew no bounds, beauty had become pure performance. The battlefield and the boudoir were competing theatres, and everyone, from the lowliest gladiator to the highest senator, wanted to shine. Literally. The Romans had conquered the world, but the real ongoing war, it seemed, was happening on their heads. In a city that loudly proclaimed virtue came from discipline and austerity, half its citizens were secretly soaking their scalps in corrosive vinegar just to look more like the barbarians they claimed to despise. And that, in a nutshell, was Roman masculinity: sturdy leather sandals, molten pride, and a faint yet persistent smell of sulphur. A paradox wrapped in a toga crowned with borrowed gold. Every empire, in its relentless pursuit of power and spectacle, eventually figures out how to turn sin into an engaging, even celebrated public display. And Rome, ever the overachiever, did it better than anyone. By the height of the empire, blonde hair wasn't just a fleeting fashion, it was advertising, a potent visual signal in the bustling, often morally ambiguous, landscape of Roman nightlife. Enter the courtesans, the elegant, scandalous, and surprisingly tax-paying professionals of Rome's vibrant underworld. Many of them were foreigners, Gauls, Germans, Syrians, women brought to Rome by the twin forces of conquest and capitalism. Their hair, often naturally lighter than that of native Roman women, immediately drew attention, a striking contrast in a city of dark tresses. When your profession explicitly depended on being noticed, on standing out in a crowded, competitive market, sunlight, coloured hair was the ancient equivalent of a neon sign flashing, available tonight. Soon even Roman-born courtesans, astute businesswomen that they were, began bleaching their hair to match the exotic allure of their foreign counterparts. Not necessarily because they wanted to look barbarian, but simply because it worked. The richer ones, Those with more discerning clientele imported actual wigs, meticulously sourced from Germania. The poorer ones, with less capital, but no less ambition, simply risked chemical burns with their homemade concoctions. In the dim, flickering lamplight of the Subera, Rome's notorious red light district, every woman, regardless of her natural hue, looked divinely golden, bathed in an artificial, alluring glow. It didn't take long for respectable Roman women to descend into a collective panic. You could always tell who had visited the wrong apothecary, or perhaps succumbed to a moment of weakness when a senator's wife suddenly appeared in public with a suspiciously new shade of what was sarcastically dubbed piety blonde. Overnight, hair colour transformed into a moral battlefield. Blondies, particularly the artificial ones, were suddenly labelled as sensual, daring, and, most damningly, untrustworthy, which of course only made everyone secretly want to be one even more. Poets and satirists, ever eager to lampoon societal hypocrisy, pounced. Juvenal, the eternal grumbler, famously wrote that you could spot a prostitute by her yellow hair. He meant it as a scathing insult, a clear mark of shame. Roman women, however, ever pragmatic and astute, heard it as invaluable, free market research. The temples stayed full, the salons stayed even busier, and the pervasive Roman hypocrisy stayed perfectly intact, shimmering with golden defiance. Blonde courtesans even ascended to the status of cultural icons. Some became so famous, so legendary, that men actually wrote poems dedicated to their elaborate wigs. Others hosted sophisticated salons where senators, poets, and philosophers debated everything from stoicism to the latest scandalous gossip, all between generous wine refills. A select few even managed to amass vast fortunes, acquiring wealth and influence that often outlasted the very men who paid for their company. They weren't just survivors, they were astute entrepreneurs, navigating a complex age when morality, like everything else, came with a very specific price tag. And yet, society, in its endless contradiction, still condemned them while shamelessly copying their style. The same senators who diligently passed modesty laws during the day were often found at night, captivated beneath the golden curls of the very women those laws targeted. Rome, it seemed, loved to moralize by day and moisturize els and accessorize by night. And nothing captured that glittering, profound contradiction better than its blondie courtesans, the true, shimmering goddesses of Roman hypocrisy. Every trend in Rome, no matter how pervasive or fashionable, eventually slammed headfirst into the same immovable wall, the Moralists. These were the professional killjoys of antiquity, a relentless chorus of disapproval comprising old, embittered senators, austere philosophers, and anyone whose social life had unfortunately expired around the same time as the Republic. The moment blonde hair became undeniably fashionable, they, with predictable outrage, declared that civilization itself was teetering on the brink of collapse. To them, bleached hair wasn't just a minor vanity, it was outright rebellion, a dangerous affront to traditional Roman values. Rome, they thundered, was being corrupted by foreign ways, a truly bold statement coming from men who were comfortably wearing Greek sandals, quoting Greek philosophers, and drinking copious amounts of Egyptian wine, all while vociferously shouting about Roman purity. The poet Juvenal, the eternal patron saint of the grumpy and the perpetually offended, accused blonde women of being deceitful, lustful, and morally bankrupt, which, in Roman society, was often interpreted as a roundabout way of saying they were exceptionally interesting. He ranted, with characteristic indignation, that women spent more time primping in front of their mirrors than they did in solemn temples. A shocking discovery that, somehow, still applies to beauty influencers 2 millennia later. Then came the politicians, ever eager to capitalize on public outrage. Moral laws were hastily passed, ostensibly to restore traditional Roman virtue. Women were sternly urged to embrace modesty, shun luxury, and most emphatically, to definitely not wear the hair of dead Germans on their heads. This, naturally, had the entirely predictable effect of making everyone want to do it even more. Every decree from the Senate, every stern pronouncement from a moralizing orator, was invariably followed by a noticeable spike in wig sales. Nothing, it seemed, sold quite as effectively as official disapproval. The panic spread like wildfire through the bustling streets of Rome. Husbands blamed blonde dye for the ruin of their marriages, citing it as the root of all marital discord. Priests, their voices echoing through the temples, warned that golden hair invited the dangerous envy of Venus herself, a goddess known for her capricious and often cruel nature. And conservative writers claimed, with dramatic flourish, that Rome's ultimate downfall would come not from barbarians at the gates, but from blondies in the bedroom. It remains unclear whether they genuinely feared divine punishment or simply their wives having more fun. But here's the undeniable truth: Rome had been shamelessly stealing other people's culture since day one. Their gods were largely Greek, their art was heavily Etruscan influenced, and now their most fashionable hairstyles were undeniably German. So, when they screamed about foreign influence, what they really meant deep down was hate not being first. The moral panic, despite its fervent rhetoric and legislative efforts, achieved exactly nothing. Of course, Rome kept bleaching, kept dyeing, and kept importing wigs by the ton. The city that claimed to despise excess was, in fact, utterly addicted to it. Powdered, perfumed, and perfectly hypocritical. By the end of the century, the moral panic, like all fleeting anxieties, had largely burned itself out, and the blondes of Rome were still glowing, their golden tresses a defiant testament to enduring vanity, because in Rome, nothing truly lasted forever, except perhaps fashion trends and a profound, pervasive sense of irony. By the early empire, hair, particularly its colour and style, had transcended mere fashion. It had become a potent, unspoken language of politics. Rome, in its meticulous bureaucracy, had laws for everything: what you could wear, who you could marry, how much jewelry you could ostentatiously flash, and if the Senate had ever figured out how to regulate it, probably how blonde you were legally permitted to be. In public, politicians, with their gravitas and carefully practiced rhetoric, preached restraint, embodying the noble Roman ideal of modesty, discipline, and solemnity. In private, however, their wives were discreetly ordering imported German wigs by the crate, each golden strand a silent defiance of public virtue. Every blonde head in the forum, every shimmering wig, was a silent political statement, a non-verbal declaration of allegiance and aspiration. Pale gold meant inherited wealth and established status. A vibrant, almost defiant copper hue signalled ambition, a desire to rise. Too dark, and one might be seen as conservative, perhaps even provincial. Too bright, too audacious, and it bordered on scandal. It was, in essence, a democracy for hair dye, but a rigid dictatorship for almost everything else. The elite, with their characteristic ruthlessness, weaponized beauty like legislation. Empresses and noble women, locked in a perpetual struggle for social dominance, competed not through eloquent debate or strategic alliances, but through the subtle, yet potent, shades of gold that adorned their heads. Whoever glowed brightest under the torchlight of a nocturnal banquet won the social hierarchy for that particular week. Some even changed their hair tone strategically: darker, somber shades for periods of mourning, lighter, more seductive hues for lavish feasts and flirtatious encounters, and somewhere in between for those delicate moments when scandalous gossip was circulating. It was less about romance and more about optics, a dynamic that, ironically, perfectly described Roman politics itself. Even men, initially dismissive, eventually joined this intricate game. Senators, who publicly mocked women for their vanity, secretly hired the most skilled barbers to refresh their curls before delivering major speeches, ensuring their appearance was as impeccable as their rhetoric. The same men who lectured about virtue and self-control spent hours meticulously plucking grey hairs with tweezers made of gleaming silver. A few, particularly those with a flair for the dramatic, even tinted their own hair blonde, insisting it was for the gods. Sure, Janus, their cynical peers might have muttered. But nothing divided Rome quite like the blonde question. To the Moralists, it was the death knell of tradition, a potent symbol of foreign corruption seeping into the heart of the empire. To the aristocrats, it was elegance itself, irrefutable proof that even barbarian beauty could be conquered, refined and domesticated. To the average citizen, it was just another thing that rich people managed to ruin. Hair colour became a shorthand for class, for virtue, and for vice. Dark hair often signified traditional beauty, a grounding in Roman values. Blonde, on the other hand, meant danger, but danger, as Rome knew all too well, was intoxicatingly addictive. By the 1st century, you could walk through the bustling, vibrant city and read its entire social structure, its complex tapestry of ambition and intrigue, simply by looking at people's heads. Every curl, every wig, every powdered strand told a story, a tale of ambition, of lust, or of pure, unadulterated survival. In the empire that ruled the world, the real battlefield wasn't fought with swords and shields, it was fought in front of the mirror, with dyes, wigs, and silent, searing judgments. If Rome had a true national symbol, it wouldn't be the eagle. it would be a shimmering blonde wig. By the zenith of the empire, hair had transcended its role as mere fashion. It had evolved into a full-blown export industry, a massive, complex enterprise that was, on occasion, tragically intertwined with war crimes. The trade in wigs was so colossal, so integral to Roman vanity, that entire intricate supply chains existed solely to keep the insatiable demand for golden locks satisfied. Blonde hair, the most coveted commodity, came predominantly from Germania, where the donations were rarely, if ever, voluntary. Captives, often women and children, were shorn like sheep, their precious hair meticulously collected and sold to rapacious merchants. These merchants, in turn, would painstakingly wash, perfume, and sort the bundles of hair before shipping them across vast distances to Rome. It was, in essence, one of the first recorded instances of imperial capitalism, powered by other people's follicles, a chilling testament to Rome's ability to commodify even human suffering. A really fine, authentic wig could easily cost more than a small farm, which, incidentally, was often how it was paid for. A grim exchange of land for vanity. Aristocrats, eager to flaunt their authenticity and their imperial reach, proudly displayed hair that once screamed in another, defeated language. Owning such a wig wasn't just about beauty, it was about ownership, about the visceral display of dominance. Rome didn't merely conquer people, it wore them. The upper classes competed fiercely for the softest texture, the lightest, most ethereal shade, each strand a testament to their discerning taste and boundless wealth. One senator's wife, a woman whose penchant for luxury bordered on the absurd, supposedly had her slaves meticulously polish her wig daily with a precious blend of olive oil and fine wine, remarking, "Barbarian hair should learn Roman refinement." This was not a metaphor. It was an actual quote from a woman who, had she lived today, would have made a terrifyingly effective and utterly ruthless lifestyle influencer. Wigs weren't exclusively the domain of women, however. Actors, ever keen to portray diverse characters, wore them on stage to signify different ethnicities or social statuses. Gladiators, in their comedic performances or mock battles, sometimes donned them for added theatrical flair. Some men, particularly those afflicted by the dreaded Roman fear of baldness, even had wigs dyed darker to cleverly disguise their receding hairlines. Imagine the scene: a bald senator, a pillar of Roman society, purchasing a wig made from a defeated barbarian woman's head. That's not just fashion, that's performance art on a profound, almost tragic scale. Inevitably, Rome, in its endless quest for control, attempted to regulate this burgeoning luxury. Edicts were passed forbidding excessive luxury, which, in translation, effectively meant, "You're spending more on your head than my entire army's annual budget." Naturally, nobody, least of all the fashion-conscious elite, paid any attention. When it came to wigs, even the most austere Stoics seemed to have their weak spots. By the 2nd century, entire neighbourhoods in Rome were devoted exclusively to the hair industry: stylists, wig makers, dyers, and merchants who could meticulously match your scalp tone to your political ambitions. The city buzzed with the latest gossip, the heady scent of exotic perfumes, and the palpable ambition disguised as shimmering blonde curls. Rome might have ruled the world with its formidable legions, but it truly conquered fashion with its scissors, its dyes, and its insatiable desire for superficial grandeur. Each wig was a silent victory, a portable monument to empire, to vanity, and to the eternal Roman art of turning someone else's suffering into exquisite style. Every empire eventually fades, and in Rome, even the most fervent hair trends had a fall of their own. By the 3rd century, the blonde obsession that had burned so fiercely through the bathhouses and boudoirs of the city finally began to lose its shimmering luster. The golden curls that once symbolized seduction, superiority, and imperial might started to feel, well, passé. Part of this decline was brutally practical. The Roman economy was in ruins, its vast frontiers were collapsing under relentless barbarian incursions, and importing authentic German hair became an increasingly complicated, if not impossible, endeavour when those very Germans were busy storming your borders. It's hard, after all, to meticulously maintain your highlights when your entire empire is quite literally on fire. Fashion, like power, tends to follow whoever is winning. As trade routes shifted eastward, so too did Roman taste. Suddenly, the Roman elite found themselves captivated by a new aesthetic: the darker, more exotic beauty emanating from Syria, Egypt and Persia. Olive skin, heavy, intoxicating perfumes, and cascades of lustrous black curls became the new standard of allure. It was a subtle message, perhaps, a collective sigh of aesthetic satiety. We've looted enough blondies. Let's diversify. Of course, some die, hard stubbornly refuse to move on. You could still spot the occasional senator's wife, clinging desperately to her blonde wig, as if it were the last flickering torch of Roman civilization, the ancient equivalent of wearing last season's Gucci to a funeral. Poets ever merciless, mock them relentlessly. She still bleaches, wrote one particularly brutal satirist, as if Rome were not already pale enough. The once bustling wig markets dried up, their stalls empty and silent. The dangerous, corrosive chemical recipes for bleaching hair, once so highly sought after, were still known but gradually fell out of favour. After centuries of sulphur, goat fat, and pervasive moral panic, the city's air finally smelled a little less like burnt vinegar and a little more like despair. But the end of the blonde age wasn't merely about changing tastes. It reflected a far deeper, more profound shift within the empire itself. Rome was no longer the confident, swaggering conqueror, proudly showing off its trophies. It was a tired empire, brittle, uncertain, and increasingly turning inward, consumed by its own internal struggles. Vanity, that most luxurious of human indulgences, requires a certain degree of stability, and the 3rd century had neither. By the time of Emperor Diocletian, even the once strict laws against luxury felt utterly pointless. There simply wasn't enough luxury left to ban. Rome's gilded, blonde dream had, quite literally and figuratively, turned grey. Still, the memory lingered like a faint, sweet perfume. Statues, frescoes, and poetry preserved the enduring myth of golden-haired divinity. And though the dye pots were empty and the wigs faded, the powerful idea that power and beauty were inextricably linked and that they shared the same radiant colour never truly died. It simply went dark for a while, lying dormant in the collective consciousness, waiting patiently for the Renaissance to rediscover the bleach. Rome may have crumbled into dust, its legions scattered, its language evolving into new forms, but its vanity, that most human of traits, survived like a perfectly preserved wig in a sealed tomb. Empires crumble, languages die, religions evolve. But the myth of the blonde goddess, that one, it seemed, had eternal life. When Europe finally, slowly, began to drag itself out of the long, dim shadows of the Dark Ages, someone, somewhere, dusted off a few Roman frescoes and, upon gazing at the radiant, golden-haired Venuses, exclaimed, "Ah yes, this. Let's do this again." Renaissance artists, ever faithful to old ideas cunningly disguised as groundbreaking innovation, enthusiastically resurrected the Roman blonde ideal. Venus reappeared on canvas, glowing in pale gold, lounging languidly on seashells, and looking suspiciously well, conditioned for a woman supposedly born from sea foam. Botticelli's iconic Birth of Venus could have just as easily been titled The Return of the Roman Beauty Standard. Even the Church, which had once so vehemently condemned vanity and earthly adornment, quietly, almost imperceptibly, changed its tune. Saints, angels, and the Virgin Mary herself began to appear in religious art with shimmering blonde hair, their halos often blending seamlessly with their golden tresses. The divine, it seemed, had officially gone platinum. God, it appeared, possessed impeccably fashionable taste. In medieval manuscripts, Eve, humanity's first sinner, was typically depicted with dark, earthy hair, while Mary, humanity's redemption, often glowed with an ethereal blonde. Subtle, right? But it wasn't just religion. Across the burgeoning nations of Europe, golden hair quickly became a powerful shorthand for purity, for grace, and for moral superiority, the very same traits Romans had once, ironically, associated with their Germanic captives. History, it seems, doesn't just repeat itself, it expertly rebrands. The potent Roman beauty myth had migrated northward, slipping quietly into the bloodstream of Western art, literature, and identity. Meanwhile, artists and poets, ever the eager purveyors of fantasy, continued to feed the illusion. Blonde women, in their verses and on their canvases, symbolized divinity, unattainable love, and pristine perfection. Brunettes, by contrast, were often relegated to the roles of mysterious temptresses, tragic figures, or in more ominous portrayals, witches. It was the same rigid hierarchy Rome had invented, simply painted with better lighting and a newfound artistic flourish. Ironically, few of these celebrated Renaissance blondes were in fact natural. Just like their Roman predecessors, noble women, desperate to achieve the coveted look, bleached their hair with potent mixtures of sulphur, ash, and the relentless, baking heat of the sun, quite literally cooking their scalps under the Tuscan sun in the name of holiness and beauty. The methods, it seemed, had barely improved over 1,000 years. Only the marketing had become more sophisticated. The Romans might have been gone for a millennium, their empire reduced to magnificent ruins, but their profound influence still sparkled in every gilded portrait and perfumed salon across Europe. They had achieved the impossible, they had colonized beauty itself. Because while Rome's physical empire crumbled into dust, its powerful, enduring idea of what divine looked like kept shining, eternal, golden, and just a little bit fake. In the end, Rome's passionate, centuries-long love affair with blondes wasn't truly about hair at all. It was, at its core, about power, the kind of power that shines brilliantly on the surface, captivating all who behold it, while something far darker, far more complex, stirs restlessly underneath. Every meticulously crafted curl, every expensive wig, every bubbling cauldron of sulphur and goat fat simmering in a patrician courtyard was an act of profound imitation, an expression of deep-seated envy, and, ultimately, a declaration of empire. The Romans didn't merely want to look beautiful, they wanted to own beauty, to conquer it, to make it subservient to their will. And when they couldn't naturally create it within their own sun-kissed populace, they ruthlessly imported it, brutally conquered it, and defiantly wore it on their heads like a victory crown. Blonde hair in this grand, intricate Roman narrative became the ultimate symbol of Rome's favourite pastime, turning what was foreign, what was other, into what was definitively, undeniably Roman. The same hands that meticulously engineered roads and towering aqueducts were equally busy stirring bleach and mixing goat fat, desperate to copy the very people they so arrogantly dismissed as barbarians. It was never just vanity. It was identity theft on a civilizational scale, a profound absorption of the conquered's aesthetic into the conqueror's self-image. The empire didn't merely expand across geography, conquering lands and peoples, it expanded across aesthetics, colonizing tastes and redefining ideals. To look Roman was to embody dominance, and to embody dominance was to look however Rome, in its capricious wisdom, decided power should look this week. In a profound, almost unsettling way, the blonde craze revealed everything about the sprawling, paradoxical empire, its deep-seated insecurity, its insatiable appetite for novelty, and its unparalleled genius for hypocrisy. Rome claimed moral virtue while relentlessly chasing luxury, mocked the conquered while shamelessly stealing their style, and built monumental tributes to discipline while often throwing lavish orgies about eyeliner and elaborate hairstyles. It was a society perpetually terrified of decline, yet utterly obsessed with youth, purity, and spectacular appearances. Sound familiar? Even today that same illusion persists. The Roman ideal of beauty, fair, flawless, glowing with an almost ethereal light, still lingers, a persistent ghost in our art, our fashion magazines, and our films. We may have traded sulphur and vinegar for sophisticated salon dyes and Instagram filters, but the underlying dream remains chillingly the same: to borrow beauty from somewhere else, from someone else, and then, with a collective shrug, call it our own. So did the ancient Romans truly love blondes? Absolutely. They loved them the way empires love everything greedily, temporarily, and without a shred of self-awareness. For a time, blonde hair meant power, perfection, and divine favour. Then, as the empire waned, it came to signify decay, corruption, and dangerous excess. But through all of it, the underlying message stayed chillingly consistent: beauty was never just about attraction. It was always and fundamentally about control, and as Rome so vividly proved, sometimes the brightest, most dazzling shine belongs to a civilization right before it spectacularly burns. Imagine standing on a windswept hill in ancient Britain, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and the distant, smoky tang of hearth fires. A war horn, deep and resonant, echoes across the sweeping valley, its mournful cry a prelude to conflict. Out from the swirling mists, a vision emerges: the Celts. Their hair, often stiffened and spiked with lime, gleams wild and untamed, like the magnificent mane of some mythical beast. Their bodies, fiercely bare and powerfully muscled, shimmer with swirling blue patterns that seem to almost breathe and writhe under the pale, northern sun. These are the Picti, as the Romans, with a mixture of awe and revulsion, called them the painted people. To the Roman outsiders, the vibrant blue dye was undeniably barbaric, a savage, primal attempt at intimidation. But to the Celts, it was something far deeper, far more sacred, an act of profound faith, a powerful declaration of beauty, and an unyielding symbol of defiance. The pigment itself came from Azatis tinctoria, a hardy plant better known as woad. Its leaves were meticulously crushed, then fermented in a pungent, earthy process, transforming into a rich, luminous indigo paste. applied to the skin often in intricate, swirling designs. It was believed to harden the spirit, to steel the flesh against pain, and most importantly, to call upon the ancient gods, invoking their protection and their fury. Some warriors genuinely believed the elaborate blue designs granted them tangible protection in battle, deflecting blows and warding off evil spirits. Others saw them as powerful talismans of identity, living sigils carved not into cold stone, but into the warm, vibrant canvas of their own flesh. Every swirl, every line carried a profound, often ancestral meaning. Some patterns spiraled outwards like miniature galaxies, symbolizing eternal rebirth and the cyclical nature of life. Others formed intricate knots, endless and unbreakable, representing unity and the interconnectedness of all things. Still others depicted the powerful forms of animals, wolves, fierce boars, ravens, sacred emblems of strength, cunning, and the raw, untamed spirit of the wild. Warriors painted themselves before combat, not out of vanity, but as a solemn, transformative ritual. Once the cool, pungent blue touched their skin, they ceased to be mere mortal farmers or hunters. They became instruments of the gods, embodiments of ancestral fury, living conduits for the primal energies of their land. The effect on their Roman enemies was often devastating. Roman soldiers, hardened by countless campaigns, wrote with a mixture of awe and disgust of these naked warriors, their guttural cries echoing through the fog and the blood-soaked earth, their blue skin shimmering like living sapphire. To fight a Celt, they discovered, was to face not merely a man, but a spirit, a wild, divine creature who seemed to have merged with the very earth and sky from which he sprang. But beyond the brutal exigencies of war, these markings carried immense tribal and personal pride. For the Celts, the body was a sacred canvas upon which life itself was painted. Each scar, each swirl of blue, was a testament to survival, to selfhood, and to an unbroken lineage. In a world of warring tribes and relentless invaders, the blue tattoos whispered a single defiant truth. We are still here, we are seen, and we will not fade. Before the Celts ever touched a sword, before they smeared their bodies with the potent blue of woad, they wrapped themselves in an explosion of colour. Across the misty, rain-swept hills of Gaul, the emerald valleys of Ireland, and the rugged, wild expanses of Britannia, tribesmen and women wore fabrics so startlingly vivid that Roman writers, accustomed to their own subdued tunics, described them with a mixture of envy and bewildered confusion. These were not drab utilitarian tunics or simple, undyed hides. Celtic clothing was a riot of pattern, an explosion of plaids, bold stripes, and intricate checks, meticulously woven from richly dyed wool. Each hue, each distinct pattern, was a language in itself, representing clan affiliation, social rank, or even the spiritual devotion of the wearer. To the Celts, fashion was never about frivolous vanity. It was identity made visible, a vibrant, moving tapestry of who they were. Wool, shorn from their hardy sheep, was their primary canvas, and nature, in its boundless generosity, was their palette. They possessed an intimate knowledge of the land, extracting deep reds from the roots of the madder plant, verdant greens from mosses and lichens, rich purples from heather blooms, and luminous yellows from precious saffron or local wildflowers. The sheer brightness of a cloak was a mark of profound pride, a testament to the wearer's skill or status, and to appear dull or drab was considered a kind of spiritual laziness, an affront to the vibrant world around them. A chieftain's mantle might shimmer with intricate golden threads, fastened at the shoulder with a gleaming bronze brooch, often intricately carved with animal motifs. Warriors, preparing for the chill of battle, wore cloaks lined with the thick fur of wolf or bear, providing both warmth and an intimidating, primal presence. Even common folk, far from the elite, took meticulous care to present themselves as integral parts of the world's living tapestry. Their garments flowed, loose, layered, and designed for unhindered movement, perfectly suited to their active, often nomadic lives. Tunics reached the knees for men and gracefully swept to the ankles for women, often cinched with finely woven belts. Cloaks, essential for protection against the elements, were clasped not only for warmth but for dramatic effect. A swirl of colour in the wind could announce one's status, one's clan, or even one's mood long before one's voice could be heard. Every pattern, every interwoven thread, told a story of family, of tribe, or of the ancient gods they revered. The famous Celtic abrat, a rectangular wool cloak, was as essential to their identity as the sword or the harp. Foreigners, observing this explosion of colour, often saw only wildness and untamed exuberance. The Celts, however, saw harmony. Each knot and stripe echoed the twisting vines of their intricate art, the spirals carved into ancient stones, the endless, cyclical nature of life they worshipped. To them, beauty was divine order, a reflection of the cosmos, and dressing boldly was a profound form of worship, a celebration of creation. Their clothes, like their potent tattoos, blurred the line between the sacred and the everyday, and when they painted their skin with woad, the patterns often mirrored their woven designs, as if their very bodies had become part of the same living, breathing fabric of their world. In Celtic culture, to be clothed or painted was to be known, to carry your entire world, your history, your spirit on your skin. If fabric spoke of tribe and colour marked the spirit, then metal was the Celts' most resonant language of pride. Jewellery was never mere decoration, it was a potent declaration of status, a powerful talisman of protection, and a deeply held expression of faith, all forged in the crucible of fire. Archaeologists, even today, continue to unearth torcs, bracelets, and brooches from ancient burial mounds, their curves elegant, their designs intricate enough to rival any Greek or Roman artisan. Yet these gleaming ornaments were distinctly Celtic, bold, organic, and alive with a palpable sense of motion. The torc was, without doubt, the most sacred and iconic of all Celtic adornments. This thick, open-ended neck ring, meticulously crafted from twisted bronze, shimmering silver, or precious gold, was worn by chieftains, by the fiercest warriors, and sometimes even depicted on the sculpted forms of their gods. To wear a torc was to declare oneself part of a divine lineage, a being closer to the otherworld, imbued with ancient power. The weight around the neck wasn't just physical, it was deeply symbolic, representing the wearer's immense duty and authority. Some torcs were so massive, so intricately worked, that they seemed ceremonial, too heavy for daily wear, suggesting they were donned only during sacred gatherings, during profound rituals, or before the terrifying crucible of battle. Celtic craftsmanship was fearless, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with metal. Using sophisticated lost wax casting techniques and meticulous fine hammering, smiths created pieces that seemed to dance with life. Spiral serpents and stylized animals intertwined in endless, flowing loops. These patterns mirrored their profound belief in the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, and reflected the same dynamic energy that ran through their tattoos and textiles. The very same spiral that a druid might paint in woad upon a warrior's skin was repeated, with breathtaking precision, in bronze on his body. Even the poorest Celt might wear a small utilitarian pin or ring, often crafted from simple bronze. Brooches, while serving the practical purpose of holding cloaks in place, were frequently miniature masterpieces, intricately engraved with knotwork and inlaid with vibrant enamel, their designs telling stories. The elite took this adornment further, adorning themselves with polished bronze mirrors, tinkling anklets, and delicate earrings, their reflections flickering mesmerizingly in the torchlight during lavish feasts and sacred rituals. Metal, in this context, became a mirror of identity, shining with both impeccable craftsmanship and profound myth. Romans initially mocked these adornments as barbaric excess, a gaudy display of primitive tastes. Yet, many years later, those same Romans, ever eager to appropriate, would adopt Celtic designs for their own jewelry, acknowledging, perhaps grudgingly, the undeniable beauty. The truth was undeniable. Celtic metalwork wasn't primitive, it was visionary, imbued with a spiritual depth. Each piece carried the pulse of a people who believed that beauty had power, that art could guard the soul, and that the sacred was woven into every aspect of existence. When the Celts entered battle, cloaked in vibrant plaid, their skin painted blue, their torso gleaming under the grey, northern sky, they didn't just fight for land or glory. They fought as walking works of art, each warrior a masterpiece of defiance and devotion, a living testament to their vibrant, unbreakable spirit. To the Celts, woad was more than a mere dye, it was a living symbol of transformation, a conduit to the divine. Preparing it was a sacred craft, bordering on alchemy, undertaken with reverence and ancient knowledge. Women, the primary custodians of this vital skill, gathered the tall, verdant plants in the warmth of summer, their hands gently plucking the broad leaves. These leaves were then meticulously crushed into a pulpy mass, which was carefully fermented until it frothed with a pungent earthy scent, a sign of its burgeoning power. The resulting paste, once dried into cakes and later reconstituted, yielded a deep, almost luminous blue, a colour unlike any other, imbued with spiritual potency. This was not casual body art. Applying wood was a profound ceremony of courage, a a powerful act of connection to the divine. Before the terrifying crucible of battle, warriors would strip to the waist, or sometimes go entirely naked, their bodies exposed to the elements. They would stand in a circle around a crackling fire, its flames casting dancing shadows, while druids, their voices deep and resonant, chanted ancient invocations to the gods of war. The cool, thick blue paste was then smeared onto the skin with meticulous care. Each swirl, each intricate knot, each powerful curve was chosen according to one's tribe, one's ancestral lineage, and one's specific purpose in the coming conflict. Some marks were explicitly protective, invoking the formidable power of deities like Taranis, the god of thunder, or the Morrigan, the phantom queen of battle. Others told personal stories past victories, sacred oaths, or the cherished memory of fallen kin. The entire process was part meditation, part spiritual transformation. The cold woad against warm skin seemed to awaken something primal, an ancient fury within the warrior. As the fire crackled, sending sparks into the night, and the air filled with smoke and rhythmic chanting, the very line between man and spirit blurred, dissolving into a singular, unified force. When dawn finally broke, painting the eastern sky with hues of grey and rose, the painted warriors looked like creatures born from another world entirely. Blue as the sky, shining with sweat, and imbued with an undeniable sense of destiny. Romans, those disciplined, pragmatic conquerors, wrote of their horror and their grudging fascination. Julius Caesar, in his commentaries, described the Celts of Britain as terrible in aspect, their blue bodies glistening under the morning sun. But what he perceived as savagery was, in truth, a meticulously observed ritual of empowerment, a profound act of spiritual consecration. Woad didn't merely decorate the body, it consecrated it. It reminded every Celt that their physical form was not separate from their sacred land or their powerful gods. To paint oneself in blue was to claim unity with the earth and sky, to step into battle not merely as a soldier, but as a living offering, a vessel for divine will. Even after the Romans came, after the old rites faded into memory, echoes of this powerful ritual lingered in Celtic knotwork, in the spirals carved into ancient stones, in the art that still carries the same rhythmic, flowing motion. The Celts may have disappeared into the annals of history, but their blue mark, their spiritual imprint, never truly faded. It still pulses, a vibrant, defiant heartbeat beneath the skin of time. The Celts didn't just wear colour, they ruled through it. Every hue had a profound, often coded, meaning. Every thread woven into their vibrant textiles carried a whisper of hierarchy and deep-seated belief. In a land without formal written laws of fashion, colour was law enough, an unspoken code understood by all. To wear certain shades was a privilege, meticulously earned through lineage, valour, or spiritual standing, never simply chosen on a whim. A chieftain's crimson cloak, for instance, was far more than a mere sign of wealth. It was a bold proclamation of his bloodline, his martial valour, and his divine favour. Red was the colour of life, of fierce battle, of both the grievous wound and the glorious victory. It was said that to wear too much of it without truly earning the right was to invite the wrath of the gods, a dangerous overstep. Green, on the other hand, symbolised fertility, peace, and the lush bounty of their land. The very colour of Danu, the ancient earth goddess. It wrapped poets, healers, and those intimately connected to the mysteries of nature, embodying growth and renewal. Blue, once primarily reserved for potent tattoos and sacred rituals, was also worn by druids and seers, those who claimed profound insight into unseen realms, embodying wisdom and spiritual clarity. Gold, of course, was the undisputed hue of kings, a symbol of ultimate power and divine connection. But gold wasn't always metal. Sometimes it was fine wool, meticulously dyed with rare saffron, its threads shimmering with a golden glow, or adorned with tiny, polished bronze beads that caught the light like sunlit dew. Their dyes, vibrant and enduring, came directly from the landscape itself, a profound partnership between art and environment. Bark from ancient trees, berries plucked from thorny bushes, lichens scraped from rocks, and an array of potent herbs were crushed into powders or boiled into potent brews that stained fabric with breathtaking permanence. A woman might dye her hair black with bog ash for a ritual, or tint it a fiery red with crushed berries, before a vibrant festival, transforming her appearance. Warriors, before battle, often rubbed themselves with bright grease or clay, amplifying their presence, making them appear like a human sunrise against the grey, misty dawn. Even their animals reflected this deep-seated love for colour. Horses, particularly those used in ceremonies, were sometimes painted, their manes braided with ribbons, their coats brushed with blue or white chalk, becoming part of the vibrant spectacle. In a world where the divine was everywhere, in the rushing rivers, the standing stones, the raging storms, colour became the Celts' powerful way of speaking to it, of participating in creation itself, echoing the vividness of nature back to the gods who made it. When Roman envoys first arrived, they often mocked what they disdainfully called Celtic flamboyance, their eyes accustomed to the subdued hues of their own empire. Yet, those same Romans, years later, would eagerly import Celtic dyes and fabrics into their bustling markets, a testament to the undeniable allure of these barbarian colours. The Celts' wild, vibrant colours outlived their tribes. They stained the imagination of Europe itself, their influence lingering long after the wood had faded from their skin and their kingdoms had fallen. Among the Celts, women didn't just share men's customs, they profoundly shaped them, their presence defining the visual and spiritual soul of Celtic society. From powerful queens who commanded armies to skilled craftswomen who wove the very fabric of their world, Celtic women were figures of immense respect and influence. In the bustling, open-air markets of Gaul or the lush, green valleys of Ireland, women stood tall and self-possessed, wrapped in flowing linen dresses dyed in radiant shades of saffron, emerald, or deep wine red. Their cloaks fastened at the shoulder with ornate, gleaming brooches, often miniature masterpieces of bronze or silver knotwork, billowed like banners of identity, each fold of fabric and glint of metal speaking volumes of their power, their lineage, and their artistic flair. Celtic women were admired, and sometimes feared, by outsiders for their fierce independence. Unlike their Greek or Roman counterparts, who were largely confined to the domestic sphere, Celtic women could own property, initiate divorce, lead warriors into battle, and even rule kingdoms, their authority often unchallenged. Their fashion reflected that profound autonomy. A noble woman might wear multiple rings on her arms, heavy, intricately twisted torcs on her neck, and elaborate braids woven with golden thread or tiny bronze beads, her hair a crown in itself. Her reflection in a polished bronze mirror wasn't an act of mere vanity, it was a ritual, a moment of self-affirmation, a declaration that she was both mortal and divine. Beauty to her was a form of power, a visible manifestation of her spiritual and social standing. Hair held a particularly special significance. Some women meticulously bleached it with lime until it shone like pure sunlight, a radiant halo. Others let it flow wild and dark, symbolizing fertility, mystery, and a deep connection to the earth. Hairstyles could clearly mark marital status, tribal identity, or profound religious devotion. During sacred festivals, priestesses would weave fresh flowers, fragrant herbs, or feathers, offerings to Bride, the goddess of inspiration and craft, into their hair. Their entire appearance was an invocation, each braid a prayer made visible, a living testament to their faith. Perfumes, too, were part of their intricate art. The Celts mixed precious oils extracted from aromatic herbs like thyme and rosemary with animal fat to create scented bombs. These were rubbed into skin and hair, not merely for fragrance, but for protection, for healing, and to foster a harmonious balance between body and spirit. Even jewelry carried hidden, potent meanings, spiral pendants for eternity, bird-shaped brooches for transcendence, crescent earrings to invoke the moon's favour. Roman chroniclers, often half in awe and half in bewildered disbelief, wrote of Celtic women riding fearlessly into battle beside their men, their vibrant cloaks flying, their spears raised high, their faces painted with the fierce blue of woad. They were elegance wrapped in ferocity, the living embodiment of a powerful balance between beauty and strength. To be a Celtic woman was to be untamed and divine, a force that no empire, however vast, could fully comprehend or control. At dawn, when the mist clung low and spectral over the moors, the Celtic war bands prepared for battle. This preparation was not merely a matter of sharpening swords and donning armour. It was a profound spiritual transformation, an act of painting their very souls. Naked, save for their gleaming torcs and the flowing cloaks they would soon discard, warriors gathered around crackling fires, their low, guttural hymns to the gods of war vibrating in the chill air. Woad paste, cool, thick, and pungently earthy, was passed from hand to hand. They smeared it across their chests, their faces, their powerful limbs, in intricate spirals and potent sigils, marking themselves as living weapons, consecrated for conflict. To a Roman legionary, standing in disciplined formation across the valley, facing this spectacle, these warriors looked less like men and more like spirits, conjured from the very earth itself. The blue skin was not just for show, it was an armor of belief, a psychological weapon. The Celts genuinely believed that woad could harden the flesh, making them impervious to pain, or at least strengthening their resolve against it. More importantly, it was psychological warfare on a grand scale. Imagine standing rigid in formation, seeing an army of half-naked men charging through the swirling fog, their bodies glowing an unnatural, terrifying blue, their hair spiked with lime, screaming ancient war cries in a language older than the empire itself. The Romans wrote that their courage was unnatural, almost insane. They laugh at death, one awestruck, terrified soldier recorded, as if it were a feast. Each mark of wood carried a specific, potent purpose. Some warriors painted their faces with jagged lines, believed to summon lightning, invoking the raw power of the storm. Others drew perfect circles to symbolize the sun's eternal return, a promise of renewal and victory. Before battle, druids, their voices deep and resonant, would anoint them, blessing the paint with sacred ash or the purifying smoke of burning oak. The transformation was total, a profound merging of the human and the divine. By the time they marched, each man had ceased to be merely himself. He was the embodiment of his ancestors, his tribe, his gods, a force of nature unleashed. The Celts also held a deep conviction that dying painted in wood ensured a noble afterlife, a glorious passage to the otherworld. To fall in battle unmarked was considered shameful, a sign that one had not truly offered oneself wholly to the divine struggle. In blue, they were both beautiful and terrifying, artists and warriors in equal measure. Even after defeat, their enemies could not forget them. Roman poets immortalized their azure warriors, their blue ghosts of the north. The woad stains lingered even on the corpses, as if the paint itself refused to surrender to death. Through pigment and courage, Celtic warriors achieved what every man craves: immortality, not in body, but in the enduring memory and myth of their defiance. Behind the Celts' vibrant appearance and symbolic tattoos stood a silent, yet profoundly powerful, guiding force: the Druids. They were not merely priests, they were philosophers, healers, astronomers, and the revered keepers of cosmic order. To them, fashion, colour, and body markings were not trivial aesthetics, but sacred geometry, the visible echo of the unseen, spiritual world. The spirals, the intricate knots, and the powerful animal motifs that adorned Celtic bodies and clothes mirrored the Druids' profound teachings of balance, interconnectedness, and eternal return. Before any great event, a coronation, a bountiful harvest, or the terrifying prospect of battle, Druids would meticulously bless the dyes and pigments. They burned oak leaves and sacred mistletoe, their voices chanting in the old tongue, while fragrant smoke drifted through the encampments. Blue wood and crimson madder became sanctified through these elaborate rituals, believed to channel divine energy into whoever wore them. A warrior's tattoo might be designed by a druid's hand, each line and curve carefully calculated to align with lunar phases, ancestral totems, or specific protective deities. In this profound sense, art was magic, and the human body was its most sacred altar. Druids viewed adornment as a direct dialogue with nature. They taught that gold captured the sun's radiant spirit, silver embodied the ethereal light of the moon, and bronze held the very breath of the earth. When a Celt clasped a golden torc around their neck, they were not merely decorating themselves, they were wearing a piece of cosmic order, binding themselves to the ancient rhythms of the universe. Even clothing dyes followed the same spiritual logic: green for rebirth and growth, red for transformation and vitality, blue for wisdom and spiritual insight. In festivals, Druids themselves wore robes dyed a pristine white with chalk, or a somber grey with ash, symbolizing purity, transcendence, and their connection to the other world. Some accounts describe them weaving strands of mistletoe into their hair, or painting powerful runes across their arms during sacred gatherings, their appearance a living prayer. To the uninitiated, it looked theatrical. To the Celts, it was the living, breathing expression of their profound faith. Through their immense influence, every act of self-presentation became sacred. To dress, to tattoo, to braid one's hair, these were all prayers in motion, acts of devotion. A Celtic warrior didn't go into battle merely to fight. He went to fulfill a spiritual duty, to embody the will of the gods. A woman didn't weave a cloak just to stay warm. She created a spell of protection and prosperity, each thread imbued with intention. The Druids blurred the boundary between the mundane and the mystical, the ordinary and the divine, and in doing so, they made the Celts' beauty inherently divine, a powerful expression of their spiritual connection to the world. Though centuries have passed since the Celts painted themselves in striking blue and wrapped their bodies in vivid plaid, their aesthetic never truly vanished. It lingers like a ghost in modern fashion, in contemporary art, and even in the very fabric of national identity. The iconic tartans of Scotland, the intricate knotwork of Ireland, the swirling, symbolic tattoos of contemporary Celtic revivalists, all trace their lineage back to those wild, defiant tribes who so boldly wore their souls on their skin. What the Romans, in their imperial arrogance, once dismissed as barbarism, has, in a glorious twist of history, become a powerful symbol of cultural pride and creative rebellion. The wood, that sacred, luminous blue of the ancients, finds echoes today in the deep indigo of denim, the crisp navy of uniforms, and the intricate, symbolic body art that graces skin across the globe. Modern tattoo artists still borrow the spiral and knot designs that once adorned powerful warriors and revered priestesses, unknowingly repeating the same meditations on eternity that druids whispered about under sacred oak trees millennia ago. Each twist of line, each curve of ink, carries the same profound message. The cycle never ends, life flows onward, and the body remains a canvas for meaning, just as it was 2,000 years ago. Celtic textiles, too, evolved, weaving their vibrant influence into the very fabric of Europe. The bold checks and plaids that once distinguished individual tribes later became emblems of powerful clans, visual surnames woven into thread. Even now, tartans evoke a powerful sense of loyalty and belonging, their colours tied to family, to history, and to a shared heritage. A simple scarf patterned in red and green can carry the same ancestral weight, the same profound sense of identity, as a warrior's painted chest. The Celts had understood, long before the modern world, that style could be both armour and declaration, a shield against anonymity and a banner of selfhood. Archaeologists still unearth bronze torcs, amber beads, and fragments of richly dyed fabric from bog burials, artefacts that have defied decay, just as the resilient Celtic spirit defied conquest. Each discovery serves as a potent reminder that their fashion was far more than mere ornamentation. It was identity crystallized, a profound fusion of body, spirit, and earth. Today, Celtic art is global. From tattoos to intricate jewelry, from festival attire to architectural motifs, people across the world adopt those ancient symbols, spirals of power, knots of continuity, colours of life and death, to express individuality and connection to a deeper, older lineage. The Celts might not have built sprawling empires of stone, but they built something far more enduring, a vibrant, visual language of freedom, of connection, and of untamed beauty. Their legacy lives not in monumental ruins, but in skin, in cloth, and in the boundless imagination of all who still dare to live boldly, fiercely, and in glorious colour. In the dawn-lit valleys of ancient Illyria, where crystalline rivers coiled like silver serpents through forests thick with juniper and pine, love was not a fleeting emotion, a mere whisper of the heart. It was a formidable force of nature, both deeply feared and profoundly revered. The women of the Illyrian tribes, attuned to the subtle energies of their land, understood that passion, untamed, could either heal or utterly destroy. So they learned to harness it, to guide its potent currents through meticulously crafted charms, potent herbs, and whispered invocations. These were not the superficial trinkets of mere superstition, but sacred instruments of the heart, tokens infused with deep belief, unwavering intention, and the very pulse of the earth itself. An Illyrian girl, upon reaching the threshold of womanhood, would often receive her first love charm from her mother or grandmother, a profound rite of passage. It might be a delicately carved seashell, its inner pearlescence holding ancient secrets, or a polished bronze pendant, gleaming like a captured sunbeam, strung on a strip of cured leather. Hidden discreetly within its hollow core was a carefully chosen blend of herbs, potent juniper berries for desire, bitter wormwood for protection against deceit, and crushed rosemary to seal unwavering fidelity. These precious amulets were worn close to the skin, nestled beneath layers of garments, warmed by the body's own heartbeat. The intimate mixture of sweat, metal, and herb was believed to awaken the charm, to breathe life into the dormant spell, making it a living extension of the wearer's will. Illyrians believed that every natural thing possessed a spirit, a unique essence. A smooth stone from a riverbed might hold the virtue of patience, a soft feather from a dove, the essence of tenderness. To craft a love charm was to invite these spirits into harmony, to command them gently, respectfully toward one specific will. For a young woman hoping to capture a lover's eye, a pendant of polished bone, intricately shaped into a continuous spiral, could summon attraction, drawing his gaze inexorably towards her. For a wife fearing her husband's wandering gaze, a small knot of red thread tightly wrapped around bitter wormwood would act as an invisible guardian, guarding against betrayal. But these charms were far more than mere practical magic. They were a language, a silent poetry written in symbol and scent. Each herb, each carving, carried a story older than memory itself. Juniper, the fiery spirit of the goddess Anzotica, embodying passion. Wormwood, the bitter herb of endurance and truth. Salt, the ancient purifier of the soul. Together, they formed a secret lexicon of love, a profound understanding known only to women. When dusk fell and the hearths glowed with a comforting warmth, Illyrian women would whisper their deepest desires to their pendants before sleep. Confessions of longing, fervent prayers for loyalty, or poignant pleas for release from an unrequited love. They believed the charms listened, that the bronze absorbed their desires, and, with the silent blessing of the night, released them into the world, weaving them into the fabric of fate. In Illyria, love wasn't loudly spoken, it was worn, hidden, and profoundly enchanted. The making of an Illyrian love charm was an art form that blurred the delicate line between meticulous craft and ancient sorcery. No woman undertook it lightly. The process itself was imbued with solemnity and deep intention. The journey began with the gathering, a ritual as sacred and potent as the spell itself. At the first blush of dawn, when dew still clung like tiny jewels to the leaves, women ventured barefoot into the whispering woods, their silence a profound form of reverence. They carefully collected herbs known for their dual power, to arouse passionate desire and to repel deceit. Juniper for its fiery essence of longing, wormwood for its bitter protection, thyme for courage, and wild mint for clarity of heart and mind. Each plant was respectfully spoken to before it was picked, thanked for its spirit, and tenderly wrapped in linen to preserve its potency, its vital energy. Back in their homes, the women worked beside the hearth, where smoke coiled like a living spirit, its tendrils carrying prayers upwards. The herbs were meticulously dried, then crushed to a fine powder, and mixed with salt for preservation or honey for sweetness, the dual ingredients of enduring love. Bronze and bone were the favoured materials for the charm casings. Bronze, the metal of the sun, was believed to attract warmth, vitality, and life, while bone, connecting the wearer to the earth's creatures and ancestral spirits, bound her to the lineage of women who had cast such spells before her. Each charm was unique, shaped by the specific intention of its maker. A pendant crafted for attraction might bear an engraving of two intertwined serpents, a powerful, ancient symbol of passion and unity. Conversely, a charm for protection would feature a crescent moon, invoking the watchful goddess of night. The craftswoman, often a woman skilled in metallurgy or intricate carving, worked in profound silence, for words, they believed, could confuse the subtle spirits within the materials. Once assembled, the charm underwent a solemn consecration. The woman would hold it above the fragrant smoke of burning sage and juniper, reciting a low invocation, part plea, part promise. "Let my love burn true, and his eyes see none but me." An ancient verse might have gone, her voice a soft murmur. A few drops of sacred oil, or, in more potent rituals, a drop of her own blood, sealed the bond, awakening the amulet's inherent power. To an outsider, this might have seemed mere superstition, but to the Illyrians, it was the meticulous science of the soul. They believed that emotion had substance, that love could be stored, carried, and released through a physical form. Each charm was a vessel of longing, each pendant a promise made to unseen forces. When worn intimately against the skin, the boundary between the woman and the spell dissolved, and her desire, given form, became fate. The Illyrians believed that every herb held a secret, a living pulse of the gods, a concentrated essence of the natural world. To mix them was to compose a kind of poetry, written not with ink, but with scent and essence, a delicate symphony of nature's power. Juniper berries, wormwood, and rosemary formed the sacred triad most often used in charms of love and unwavering fidelity. Juniper, the fiery seed of the highlands, was said to awaken the blood, stirring primal longing and passion. Wormwood, bitter and sharp, was its profound opposite, a potent shield against deceit and the allure of unworthy lovers. Together they formed a perfect balance, passion tempered by prudence, desire guarded by defense. A woman seeking to ignite a new love might begin with juniper. She would crush the berries between her fingertips, releasing their sticky, resinous essence into a carrier oil or sweet honey. whispering the name of the man she longed for, envisioning his gaze upon her. The charm, once sealed, was worn close to her heart, its aroma faint but constant, a steady heartbeat in scent form. Over time, the wearer would believe her own confidence grew stronger, her presence more magnetic, more alluring. To the Illyrians, this wasn't mere illusion, but the spell taking root, the love energy made visible through her own blossoming self-assurance. Wormwood, meanwhile, was the herb for the betrayed or the cautiously wise. Its inherent bitterness embodied endurance and truth. Women burned it beside their beds to drive away the insidious spirits of jealousy, the whispers of lies, and the threat of wandering hearts. A bronze pendant filled with dried wormwood leaves was believed to make a lover faithful, not through coercion, but through a subtle, gentle weaving of loyalty into his very spirit. To enhance its strength, some mixed it with ashes from burned letters, symbols of broken promises, or even locks of hair, blending memory with potent magic. Other plants joined these rituals in more secretive, specialized ways. Wild thyme, associated with courage and boldness, was often tucked into the hem of a tunic before a woman prepared to confess her deepest feelings. Rosemary, revered for its memory-enhancing properties, was intricately woven into braids during wedding ceremonies to ensure lasting harmony and remembrance. Myrtle, sacred to love itself, was placed beneath pillows to summon vivid dreams of one's destined partner. Each herb was considered alive, a sentient being, and each combination told a unique, potent story. In Illyrian lore, herbs did not simply symbolize emotion, they embodied it, they were it. To wear them was to carry living witnesses of the heart's desire, and as long as their fragrance lingered, the profound bond between the human and the divine remained unbroken. A love that could be felt, smelled, and eternally remembered. While herbs carried the potent scent of love and intention, bronze and bone gave it tangible shape, a physical form through which to manifest desire. To the Illyrians, these materials weren't chosen for their aesthetic beauty alone, they were revered as vessels of spiritual energy, each holding its own unique resonance, its own ancient memory. Bronze, with its warm, glowing hue, was considered the very breath of the sun, a living metal forged in fire, symbolizing vitality, fierce courage and eternal passion. Bone, on the other hand, came from the earth's creatures, a poignant reminder of mortality, a deep connection to ancestry, and the thin, permeable line between life and death. Together they formed the body and soul of every Illyrian charm, a delicate balance of earthly and celestial power. Bronze pendants were most common among noble women and priestesses, their surfaces polished until they shone like captured amber, reflecting both the sun's radiant energy and the wearer's inner light. Before it was cast, the bronze was often ritually mixed with a few grains of sacred salt or ash from ancient, hallowed fires, binding it to the divine. Artisans, their hands skilled and reverent, engraved these pendants with intricate spirals, perfect circles, and delicate crescent moons. Powerful symbols of love's endless cycle, of cosmic unity. Some were shaped like the graceful curve of a seashell or the universal symbol of a heart. Others, more primal, took the form of the wings of doves or the majestic horns of stags, each form whispering a different kind of desire, a unique invocation. Bone charms, however, carried deeper, more secret meanings. They were intensely intimate, often carved from the remains of animals hunted respectfully or from ancestral relics, fragments of those who came before. A charm meticulously crafted from a bird's bone promised freedom in love and unbridled passion, a soaring spirit. One fashioned from a deer's bone carried the energy of pursuit and grace, embodying devotion. For women who had tragically lost lovers to war or cruel betrayal, bone amulets served as powerful talismans of remembrance, fragments of the living transformed into sacred objects through touch and profound devotion. The entire process of crafting these charms was steeped in ritual and reverence. Women worked in quiet, secluded rooms, lit only by the flickering glow of a hearth fire, shaping bronze with small, rhythmic hammers and carving bone with sharpened flint. The silence was deliberate, almost sacred sound, they believed, could disturb the subtle spirits residing within the material. Once complete, the charm was carefully dipped in fragrant herb oil and held over the purifying smoke from burning juniper, sealing its power, awakening its latent magic. When the bronze glowed warm against the skin, or the bone charm rested cool near the heart, the wearer felt an undeniable connection to something larger than herself, the eternal rhythm of love, loss, and longing. The Illyrians believed that as long as the metal and bone endured, so too would the desires they carried, held safe within their ancient forms. In Illyrian love magic, meaning was not painstakingly written in words, but eloquently expressed in form. Every curve, every line, every intricate pattern carved into an amulet spoke its own unique dialect of desire, a silent language understood by the heart and the gods alike. The women who crafted these potent charms knew that the divine listened not to mere speech, but to symbols, to the profound resonance of sacred shapes. And so, they learned to write their deepest feelings in bronze and bone, using a language far older than any alphabet. The spiral was the most ancient and powerful of all motifs. It symbolized the cyclical journey of the heart, from the initial stirrings of longing to the sweet fulfillment of passion, from moments of profound peace to the inevitable return of desire, turning endlessly like the seasons. To carve a spiral was to acknowledge that love never stood still. It was a dynamic, ever-changing force. Lovers exchanged spiral pendants as promises of constancy, believing that as long as the intricate design endured, their hearts would inevitably return to each other across any distance, any obstacle. The knot was another sacred motif, a visual prayer for unity and unbreakable bonds. Some were simple loops of leather cord, elegantly tied, others were intricate braids of silver wire meticulously woven. The tighter and more complex the knot, the stronger the bond it represented. Married couples often tied their charms together before the wedding ceremony, ritually merging their destinies through craft, rather than mere legal contract. If the knot unravelled with time, it was seen as a grave warning, a subtle sign that betrayal or misfortune might lurk near. Animals, too, spoke through these designs, each carrying a specific symbolic weight. Doves embodied tenderness and peace, snakes symbolized seduction, transformation, and rebirth, and stags represented pursuit, loyalty, and masculine grace. When a woman carved a snake onto her amulet, she wasn't invoking deceit, she was calling upon transformation. The powerful ability to shed old love, old hurts, and emerge renewed, empowered. A charm shaped like a soaring bird promised liberation from the suffocating grip of jealousy or grief. Its wings a poignant reminder that love, to truly live, must breathe freely. Even geometric shapes held profound power. The perfect circle invoked wholeness and eternity. The crescent moon called to the goddess of fertility and desire, her watchful gaze illuminating the night. Triangles pointing upward were potent symbols of masculine fire, of aspiration and divine connection. Pointing downward, they represented feminine water, intuition, and the mysteries of birth. When the two were fused, they formed a diamond shape, symbolizing a harmonious balance between passion and profound peace. To the Illyrians, these intricate carvings weren't mere decoration. They were coded messages to the gods and to the heart alike, silent invocations woven into beauty, sacred geometry etched forever into time. A charm's true power, they believed, lay not in its metal or its herbs, but in its meaning, its profound intention. When love was desperately desired or tragically threatened, Illyrian women turned to the ritual of binding, a potent ceremony that sought to join two souls through the power of charm and unwavering intention. It was not a public rite, but a deeply private, moonlit act, performed in the profound stillness of night when the world's clamour faded, and the veil between worlds thinned. Some bindings were born from tender, hopeful longing, others from the depths of desperation or fear, but all were woven with meticulous care, for to bind love was to dare to touch fate itself. The ritual began with meticulous preparation. The woman would cleanse herself in river water, purified and infused with crushed herbs, juniper for desire, rosemary for unwavering devotion, and wormwood to guard against deceit. Her skin was anointed with fragrant oil, her long hair unbraided to symbolize openness and receptivity. She wore no jewelry, save for the specific pendant she intended to enchant. At her side, a small clay lamp burned, its flickering flame mirroring the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The charm itself, often a polished bronze shell or a coiled spiral, was reverently placed upon a cloth of deep red wool, the colour of blood, of life, and of passionate union. The woman would then whisper her lover's name into the hollow of the charm, 3 times, her breath believed to awaken its slumbering spirit. Then came the binding verse, spoken in the ancient Illyrian tongue, a powerful blend of prayer and command. Let our hearts beat in one rhythm, our eyes see one dawn, our fates be twined till the stars forget their path. As the words were spoken, a red thread was carefully wound around the charm, each knot a solemn promise, each turn a binding vow. Some women, in a gesture of profound commitment, wove strands of their own hair into the thread, believing it tied their very essence to their lovers. Others pricked their fingers, allowing a single drop of blood to seal the final, most potent knot, a merging of life forces. When the ritual was complete, the charm was hidden under the woman's pillow for 7 consecutive nights, allowing its power to fully infuse her dreams and intentions, before being worn close to her heart, a constant reminder of the bond. Yet this potent magic carried its inherent dangers. To bind love was, in a sense, to deny the gods their freedom to weave fate, to interfere with cosmic design. If done out of greed, out of jealousy, or with malicious intent, the charm could backfire catastrophically, turning pure passion into suffocating obsession, or genuine affection into bitter sorrow. The Illyrians understood this delicate balance well. True love charms, they believed, did not enslave, they harmonized. The ritual's true power lay not in control, but in connection, a profound merging of hearts under the silent, watchful witness of the moon. In Illyrian culture, love was sacred, but loyalty was divine. Fidelity charms were among the most carefully crafted of all, designed not to inflame desire, but to preserve the precious trust once it had been earned. For the Illyrians, betrayal wasn't merely an emotional wound, it was a profound spiritual contamination, a disturbance of the delicate balance between souls, an affront to the cosmic order. To protect against this insidious threat, women created amulets imbued with devotion, unwavering faith, and vigilant awareness, invisible guardians of the heart constantly at watch. The most common form was the bronze pendant of binding, a small, circular disc meticulously engraved with 2 entwined lines that never crossed, never broke, a powerful symbol of unity without dominance. Within its hollow core rested a sacred mixture of dried wormwood to guard against deceit, crushed rose petals to rekindle tenderness and passion, and powdered seashell several to invoke the sea goddess Thana, the ancient protector of vows. Worn close to the skin, the amulet was believed to hum softly, almost imperceptibly, with the rhythm of the wearer's heartbeat, a constant, gentle reminder to both giver and receiver of their solemn promise. Men, too, carried their own versions. Warriors departing for battle were given leather cords strung with polished river stones or small fragments of their beloved's jewelry. Some even carried a tiny pouch containing a lock of hair mixed with salt, a charm meant to keep the mind clear and the spirit faithful while far from home, amidst the temptations of war. If temptation arose, they were instructed to grip the amulet tightly and speak a short, potent invocation. Eyes to the horizon, heart to the one who waits. Not all charms guarded romantic fidelity alone. Some were specifically meant to preserve the sacred bonds of friendship or family loyalty. Mothers tied blue threads around their children's wrists before long journeys, whispering blessings for honesty and remembrance. Sisters exchanged tiny bone pendants carved with twin moons, promising eternal trust even when separated by vast distances or the demands of marriage. The true magic, however, lay not merely in the materials, but in the unwavering intention behind them. Illyrians believed that faithfulness, once pledged with genuine intent, summoned its own powerful spirit, a watchful guardian that lingered near the lovers, a subtle energetic presence. Should one heart begin to waver, the other would instinctively feel it, a tightening in the chest, a restless dream, a faint, inexplicable shiver in the night. These sensations were seen not as punishment, but as warnings, as precious chances to restore harmony before the bond irrevocably broke. Not all Illyrian love charms, however, were innocent expressions of tender longing or protective devotion. Hidden within the same rich culture that honoured fidelity and tenderness existed another, darker craft, one whispered about in hushed tones in market stalls and in the shadows of remote mountain shrines. These were the forbidden charms, potent tools of seduction, manipulation, and, in their most dangerous forms, vengeance. Where ordinary amulets sought harmony and connection, these sought control and domination, and though they were widely feared, they were never truly forgotten, for love's shadow side, the Illyrians understood, was as powerful and compelling as its radiant light. Such charms were said to be crafted under the cold, diminishing light of a waning moon, a time when energies faded and the boundaries between worlds thinned, making such dark magic more potent. The woman who dared to make one often did so alone, barefoot and silent, her face veiled to conceal her true intent from the ever-present spirits. She would mix potent, burnt wormwood with ash from a discarded garment of her intended victim, a fragment of bone from a creature of the night. and a single, potent drop of her own blood. This ominous blend, sealed in a small bronze locket or wrapped tightly in animal hide, was meant to awaken an irresistible, almost unnatural desire, or, in darker hearts, an unending, suffocating guilt. The most feared of all was the charm of turning, used when love curdled into bitter betrayal. Women scorned by faithless partners fashioned these amulets to turn the betrayer's heart cold, to extinguish his passion for another. The ritual called for the charm to be buried precisely where three rivers met, a powerful symbol of the crossroads of fate and destiny. Once done, it was believed that the betrayer's affections would sour, his passions fading into a bewildered confusion and lingering regret, his new love turning to ash. Such practices were not sanctioned by the revered druids or the wise priestesses. They were acts of rebellion, driven by wounded pride, by desperate longing, or by a thirst for retribution. Yet, even these dark charms carried a certain kind of wisdom. They revealed the Illyrians' profound understanding that love, in its rawest form, could not exist without danger. Passion, left unchecked, could burn as easily as it could warm, leaving only ruin in its wake. Legends tell of women who used forbidden charms only to regret it deeply, their lovers returning but hollow, emotionless, bound by something unnatural and terrifying. Others, however, claimed success, that kings fell hopelessly enamoured of humble priestesses, that chieftains abandoned war for love spells, whispered in secret, their wills bent. In truth, the forbidden charms reflected a deeper truth about Illyrian belief that every emotion, even love, demanded a profound balance. For every blessing, there was a potential curse. For every union, a perilous risk. The Illyrians understood what few societies ever have, that love's greatest power lay not in its pristine purity, but in its dangerous, untamable, and utterly profound depth. Though the Illyrian tribes eventually faded into the shadows of history, their charms and amulets left behind echoes that never truly vanished. Archaeologists have unearthed small bronze pendants, seashells meticulously pierced for stringing, and delicate bone carvings shaped like moons and spirals, silent, poignant remnants of a people who believed love was a living spirit, a force that could be harnessed. Even after their kingdoms fell to the relentless might of Rome, and their ancient gods were renamed or absorbed, the Illyrian language of affection endured, hidden in rural customs, woven into wedding rituals, and whispered as blessings passed from mother to daughter. In the remote mountain villages of the Western Balkans, traces of these profound beliefs survived for centuries, like an underground spring. Women still tied red threads around their wrists to ward off envy and ill will. They placed juniper beneath their pillows to invite dreams of true love, and they burned wormwood to cleanse a faithless heart or a troubled home. These were not mere superstitions. They were fragments of an ancient worldview in which emotion, nature, and divinity were inextricably inseparable. To love was to perform a sacred act. To craft a charm was to shape fate with one's own hands, to participate in the cosmic dance. Modern scholars once dismissed these amulets as mere trinkets, the playthings of a primitive people, but recent discoveries have revealed their astonishing sophistication, how precise the engravings were, how intentional the herbal blends, how harmoniously they combined artistry and profound spirituality. The Illyrians understood something we often forget, that belief gives objects power, and intention turns mere matter into magic. Even today, echoes of Illyrian passion can be felt in Mediterranean love traditions, from the rosemary wreaths of Dalmatia to the protective pendants worn by brides across Albania and Montenegro. The symbolism of the spiral, the knot, and the crescent still reappears in jewelry, in tattoos, and in folk art, carrying forward the same timeless messages of unity, desire, and eternal return. If you look closely with an open heart, you can still see them, the bronze gleam of a pendant in a bustling marketplace, the invigorating scent of juniper in a festival fire, the faint, bitter trace of wormwood in a healing tea. These are the direct descendants of Illyrian charms, quietly reminding the modern world that love, at its core, is both fragile and immortal. The Illyrians may be gone, but their magic endures, not as myth, but as the lingering heartbeat of a civilization.